Okay, perfect.
Good?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Building Trust and Legitimacy in Your Community on Social Media. My name is Erica Brooks, and I'll be your host today. Before we get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items with you. First, all attendees are on mute, but feel free to use the question function in your control panel to submit any questions to us throughout the webinar. There'll be time at the end for Q&A, and Anil and the chief can take your questions then. And of course, the webinar is recorded, and you'll receive a copy by email from me following the presentation. Today's webinar will come in 3 parts. First, we're going to hear from Chief Eric Blanchard, Police Chief in Pass, Texas, about the work he's done with his community. Then Anil Chawla, founder and CEO of Archive Social, will talk about how to fulfill your public records responsibilities as your social media following grows. Then I'll facilitate a Q&A with Chief Blanchard and Anil to answer any questions. Again, don't hesitate to submit your questions using the question function in your control panel at any time during the webinar. Chief Blanchard will speak more specifically about his qualifications and experience in just a second, but as a quick introduction, he's been policing since 2002. He's held various roles in 3 other towns in Texas, and in 2012, he was hired as the police chief of Aransas Pass, Texas. Today, we'll hear about the work he's done to change the dialogue around the police department and the results of those efforts. Thank you, Chief, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I've experienced in my small little community with the rest.
Fantastic. And with that, I'm handing control over to you.
Very good. So let's just make sure you guys can see everything okay?
Looks good here.
Awesome. So what I'm going to talk to you guys about today is building trust and legitimacy with your community through social media and community engagement. And basically, if you see some of the key words here, you'll notice that trust and legitimacy are both part of the 21st Century Task Force on Policing Pillars. And this is something that we've been doing since 2012. Again, on me, just a little brief there. I began my policing career back in September of 2000. I got started real early. I turned 21 in the academy. I skipped school because I didn't believe in higher education, so I wanted to just get to working. So that's what I did. I started in Mathis, worked a short time there, and then I went to Sinton, where I spent most of my time. I immediately moved up into investigations, and investigations is kind of where I got a name or established a name for myself. I've worked some pretty big cases over the years that I spent as a detective. I burned out of that for a little while, so I went to Portland Police Department for 1 year, Portland PD being extremely boring. No crime, no action, no anything. I decided to go back to Sinton. I was hired on as a lieutenant to help the chief run the department. There was a lot of needs and technology updates that they needed, so that's what I did. And then in 2012, sitting basically in a friend's garage, having a beer or two, they thought it would be a creative idea for me to put in for police chief in Aransas Pass because the position came open. Well, lo and behold, the DA asked me to put in, and then I had a bunch of letters just start showing up promoting me for the position, and they hired me. No college education, nothing. I thought it was surreal. Later on, though, I would go back to college, and I've since got my bachelor's, and I'm working on my master's now, unfortunately. But my greatest accomplishment so far while being chief here in the city of Aransas Pass has been to regain the trust of the community and establish a firm foundation of legitimacy for the police work that we do here in the community. And having that, it gives us relevance in our community, and it builds our support within our community. In the beginning, we had a broken relationship. If you Google us 2012 or before then, you will see stuff about police corruption, no communication. It was a very, very bad place and time during that year and before. It was an us versus them mentality. We were working for people in our community, and we weren't working with our community, and that's big, and we'll discuss that here in a little bit. We had no transparency, no accountability. Just to give you a glimpse of how bad we were, we didn't even do our job back then. We had sex offenders complaining to the state sex offender program that we refused to register them for over 2 years. We were just in a very bad place and time before I came in. But I cannot discount the staff. We had some very, very good staff here. We just had very, very shoddy leadership. So I knew that I had my work cut out for me, and we had to get started. We had no online presence whatsoever. So before I even got hired on, I had already started working on the website. And it took me a few months to get our website built on WordPress, and you'll get an example of this here. I'm a web developer, so this is what I've created on our website. And that's just a little highlight. But some of the main focal points you'll see here is, of course, a listing of all the pages. The highlight is the blotter. And then, of course, you always want to attract people to jobs. And we got our little emergency alert button. That's just to allow people to sign up for emergency alerts. As you know, we do have the potential for hurricanes. That hurricane you may or may not see in the background as a wallpaper is actually Hurricane Harvey that struck us in 2017. And while I'm on it, they gave me 20 minutes. I'll go ahead and play this video here real quick. This is a video we put out to the community highlighting public awareness.
No, I appreciate it. You're doing a great job there. Keep up the good work, okay, buddy? All right. Well, thank you all for coming to the meeting this morning. As you know, they've predicted a very slow hurricane season, but that doesn't mean that we don't still need to be prepared. I know that Chief has started stocking up on water. Sarah started stocking up water. There's a storm coming. There's a storm coming. Come on, guys, let's go. Really? Chief, not again. You'd know if we had a real emergency. That's why we have code red emergency notification.
Sign up for Code Red to get emergency alerts you can count on. Call, email.
So anyways, that's just a way that a video we use to kind of attract folks to signing up, our residents to sign up for our emergency alerts. As you can see, I'm very big on humor, and I will speak to that here momentarily as well. So anyways, you've seen our WordPress site. We also got started immediately because a website takes time to build. So we got started immediately on establishing ourselves through social media. At the time that we got started, Rosenberg, Texas kind of led or paved the way, and they were the leaders that you wanted to strive after. Well, we since have become a leader in our area here in the Coastal Bend. We have over 38,000 likes, as you can see here, and we have 47,000 total followers. We regularly engage our community with information, and like I said, with humor, I'm very big on humor. I try to incorporate it to a lot of what we do. In fact, on my job hiring job duties, it is required that you have a good sense of humor before you apply with the job. Otherwise, don't apply here. You got to have a sense of humor. But anyway, so we put out about, I would say, 2/3 positive, uplifting, humor type information and 1/3 bad. And when I say bad, I'm talking about people who got arrested, crime events. Occasionally we have bad stuff where we make mistakes, and I like to be the first to tell. So I do mention those things as well. because we have to write our narrative. You can't let the community and the media write it for you, because we've all seen how well they've been doing for policing. Another thing is we got pretty big in community events. So everybody, I'm sure, online is familiar with National Night Out. Our National Night Out is in October, just like Texas and Florida do it in October. They think it's cooler during that time. It really is not. It's just as hot as June. But anyways, I always try to team up with a tech company. The first time we did it, we teamed up with Ring Video Doorbells. We got sponsors to purchase 20 Ring Video doorbells, and we gave them out mostly to residents that participated in our National Night Out through like a raffle, a random raffle. This last National Night Out, I don't know if you guys are familiar with OWL car camera. It's basically video surveillance and security that's wirelessly connected for your vehicle. And it has an indoor and outdoor camera, so it faces in, faces out. You can have a two-way dialogue and stuff like that with somebody breaking into your car. It's hugely awesome. You need to check it out. So I reached out to them, and they said, you know what? We like the idea of your National Night Out. We want to participate. And here's a video that they put together from that.
Owl cameras is at National Night Out in Arizona, Texas. We brought an owl cam out here to show you how easy it is to install. We're going to give away an owl cam to the fastest person here.
I personally think it's awesome, especially when you have a gift card. I so need one.
I think it's pretty awesome. I really like how it connects to your phone, and you can view it wherever you're at. I just want to say thank you all for being part of our National Night Out this evening. As you can see, it was a great event, and your kind contribution to our community is amazing. Thank you for being a partner with your as police department in our community.
So there you can see a video that they put together, which I really liked. They use that as a promotional video. I use it to illustrate our close community collaboration and efforts that we do with our community. OWL ended up giving away 3 OWL cameras. In fact, there was a little kid there. I think he had the fastest time, but because he was under 18, they couldn't give him a camera, so they gave him a cup. But we also had purchased through contributions that we had, we purchased about 17 more that we raffled off to the community as well. Moving along here, another thing we started doing, and I know that we're not the first in this, but we've had some great success with it, is we occasionally do live ride-alongs. This is an example of my live ride-along that I did. I was live for about an hour and 40-something minutes, and believe it or not, people actually stayed with it the whole time. As you can see here, we had over 2.6 million views and 1.7 million reactions, basically, or people reached and engagements and all that. You can see the numbers yourself. Of course, there's a lot of fat jokes, donut jokes, and stuff like that, and I love to go along with those. I've been fat my whole life, and I appreciate it. It hasn't confined me any, so I kind of roll with the punches and jump in with the humor alongside them, try to turn them around, and you'd be surprised. It brings us good favor. Another big thing that we've done is we've gotten into the position of allowing outside scrutiny and inspection. We are an open book. If you are in public service, you have no authority if you have no support from your community. That is big. One of the things that we did is we partnered with the local university, Texas A&M University out of Corpus Christi, and gave them unfettered access to our body cam footage we had mostly already recorded and uploaded. They selected us because during the time they were researching doing this study, we were one of 8 agencies nationwide that outfitted every police department staffer with a camera, and we also had the largest archive or stash of video recorded in the system. Like I said, most of the video that they reviewed, 600 videos they watched through some type of random selection that they developed, had already been recorded. So the officers and code enforcement, animal control and all that, they had no idea that they were being recorded for this purpose at that time. And they basically gave us a clean bill of health and said that the majority of our contacts result in a good ending. There's nothing negative. And there was no difference in how we treated somebody that was black, white, Hispanic, homosexual, straight, or whoever. It really doesn't matter to us who you are. We provide the service equally. And that's what another good thing that you can do, because that builds that sense of legitimacy and trust with your community. So our accomplishments, as you saw, huge following, great community support. We get a lot of good news that we share, and the bad news, you're going to have it. I always preface our good with the bad. I tell folks, thank you for the good. We appreciate it. It's not always going to be good. We're human. We're fallible. We're going to make mistakes. But when we make a mistake, we want to know about it. Don't just tell me the good, tell me the bad, because I need to focus on what is perceived as bad or what is bad so that we can turn it around and fix it. And you will notice with this model of 2/3 good, 1/3 bad, your bad news fades away. People don't dwell on that as much. They want to see the good stuff. I don't know why the news hasn't caught on to that yet. It's elevated department morale, and it's created ease of hiring, and those both go hand in hand. When we have an opening in the area around here, we usually get a lot of applicants. Now, they're not all good applicants, but we get a lot of them. If you look at other agencies around us, they may even pay more. They don't have hardly the application pool that we're seeing, so it's great. My staff, we always tell them, shoot for the stars, but I don't tell them I'm going to settle for the moon. We always have to raise that level of expectation and the goal so high it's unachievable, but we never let them in on thinking it's unachievable. That gets them to strive to try to achieve it. We got a greater community understanding, greater transparency, and less forced accountability. And what I mean by that is we put out so much information, we're not getting challenged to release information. In fact, when somebody makes a comment online or whatever and says that PD's covering up again, we usually have an army of supporters that come out and they'll hit them back with examples of how we are the most transparent of agencies. And one of those ways of being transparent is beat them to the punch. You can see everything I put out on our website. You can see everything I put out through social media by simply going to our archives. This is on our website, the police department website. You can go right over there. Here you go. Through social archive, you can search anything that's been posted on any of our social media platforms, and we have several of them platforms that we're using. We got YouTube, Twitter. This is for the whole city, not just the police department. We had Instagram, got rid of them, they're useless. Facebook pages. You can search whatever you want to your heart's desire, and you can find it. No need to have to come to me. We're giving it to you. The next thing that we also do, and this is new, and I like to say that Archive Social covers us online so we can cover our community offline, and that is so true. When they do all the back-end information, they keep it safe and sound. When we get an open records request from an attorney or somebody investigating a case, or just the public wanting something in specific that we said or did online, it's easily accessible and it's there. As you can see, this is something new that they started. We were a beta tester for Archive Social, and I love it. It's capturing our police department website. I actually told them about this, or my desire to see this implemented, when we first signed up with them, because they didn't have it. Well, they had already heard as well. They were working on something, and they provided. So you can see our website there, and I can go back to there. I can go back to here. I can go down even further. Oh, you can see when I was trying out the little Facebook thingy there, and I can go even further. I can go even further. Where is it? It was on here before. There it is. You can see where I changed the background. This was put out around Christmas. So you could just totally go back and see every different variation and version of our webpage. And did you know you're required to save that data? you have to save your social media data and stuff like that. I think that they'll probably speak to that a little bit more, but they help cover us in that area so that it's not a worry for us. We can focus on the service we provide our community. And, the list of accomplishments just go on and on. But I think you've heard enough of me. I'd like to hear your questions, if there are any questions when we get to that point. But if you need to get a hold of me because you don't want to talk today about something that we're doing, you can reach me off this webinar. I'd be more than happy to visit with you. With that, Erica, I'll turn it back over to y'all.
Yeah, thank you, Chief, for sharing so many details of how you've been able to rebuild your relationship and really seemingly took what could have been a kind of sticky and bad situation and made it for the best. Before we move on to the next, awesome, thanks. Before we move on to the next part of our webinar, I'd like to remind everyone to please submit any questions you have for the Chief or Anil through your question function in the portal. We're getting some good ones coming in already, but keep them coming.
So do you want us to answer these questions right now, or are we going to wait, Erica?
Oh, I've got it. I'll get there.
Okay.
So next we're going to hear from the Archive Social founder and CEO, Anil Chawla. Anil is a nationally recognized subject matter expert on legal, policy, and records management issues related to social media and government. As we heard from the Chief, maintaining your social media communications as a public record is an important part of building transparency. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Archive Social, it is the leading provider of social media archiving for government agencies with over 2,000 public agency customers, including New York City, Chicago, and Dallas. With that, I'll turn it over to Anil.
Well, great. Thank you, Erica, and thank you, everybody, for joining us, most of which, Chief Blanchard, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell your story. The notion of trust and legitimacy is a very bold statement, and we all really appreciate hearing your candor on the situation there in Aransas Pass before you took the role as Chief, and the approach that you take. It does come down to transparency and authenticity, and very, very exciting to hear the turnaround that you've been able to implement there in Aransas Pass. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back on that topic of transparency, but I wanted to share one little trivia fact, Chief. You mentioned that your journey as Chief really started over a beer with some friends. Interestingly enough, the journey here at Archive Social, of course, started the same way. It's pretty amazing what happens over a beer with some friends. So it was a beer with a friend at a local brewery where I first learned about public records requirements and the challenges that a local agency was having with record keeping, to the extent that the communicator who was using social media was copying and pasting every tweet that she sent into a Word doc in order to comply with public records law. And that really spun us off on this journey with Archive Social. So again, thank you, Chief, for sharing your story. We will come back to you. I know folks on the line here have a lot of questions for you. So I'm going to go down that little detour there on public records for a little bit here, because it's such a critical issue, and it really needs to become a mainline concern for agencies. And appreciated your mention of Archive Social. I'm actually going to step us back. My goal here for the audience is to be educational. I'm going to talk to this public records issue for those of you managing social media, whether you're a social media manager, you're in the communications team, or you're involved with public information responsibility in some way. Perhaps you're a clerk, perhaps you're in IT and you're responsible for supporting the record keeping. I want to talk to this notion of social media as a public record and give you an update on what we're seeing in the landscape, as well as give you some high-level guidance, some different options to consider as an agency to ensure that you're in the best position possible to protect yourselves so that you can employ the same kind of transparency and authenticity that they have in Aransas Pass, and really have that level of social media engagement that so many agencies have found to be ultimately very, very beneficial, to draw that line with that channel with your audience and have that really open dialogue, but also be protected on the back end. So for those of you who are saying, well, wait a minute, hold on, social media public record, what exactly do you mean by that? What is there a law change? What's happened? The nuts and bolts of this really come down to the fact that every state in the country has a public records law. You've had one in your state since the 1970s. It's called something different based on whichever state you're in, whether it's Florida Public Records Law, or it's the right to know, or it's the Open Records Act, or all the different names. In New Jersey, they call it Oprah. They all fundamentally boil down to the same set of philosophies around communication from government and to government can constitute public record and should be managed as such. Now, that has been the basis for social media being treated as public record. And over the years, agencies and authorities have come to grips with that. I wanted to point you to this resource, though, if you're curious about what the exact guidance is in your state. You can go to bit.ly/SM Public Records, click on your state. So if you're in Texas, you can go to click on Texas and see the exact guidance. So, for example, if you're in Texas, you'll see that in 2013, a Senate bill was passed to make it abundantly clear that internet postings constitute public record. And you'll also see some of the additional guidance that's come out from the Texas DIR since then. So depending on whichever state you're in, it's perhaps a different authority, but the latest and greatest guidance is available to you. We've consolidated this in one resource for you at Archive Social's website. Again, this is the guidance from your state, and there's been a lot of clear guidance that's come out in the last 3 or 4 years from many of the states across the country. So I'm going to move forward to practicality. Let's take that legal requirement, which can appear to be somewhat academic, of, okay, well, yeah, I see it's a record, but hey, it's on Facebook, it's on Twitter. I have a lot of other things to do and deal with. I'm not so worried about it. That might be a reaction that you have. So I want to steer you back to, well, what's actually happening in the news, what's happening with agencies across the country, and what the reality is. And we've seen a massive uptick in the last 3 or 4 years around social media records requests, legal discovery involving social media. And so in these presentations, I like to give the audience an update on what's happening. So if you've been following Archive Social for some time, listening to our webinars, hopefully you're hearing some new case studies that can be valuable to you as a communicator, or to you as someone with that responsibility in the agency to help protect your agency. This is very recent, just from this month, May 15th, published in Colorado, and it really touches on this trend that we've been talking about for probably about the last 18 months around First Amendment concerns. And again, if you've been following Archive Social, or you've been following the news in general, you have seen this topic come up time and time again. You've seen it come up not only in local regions, but really at the state and national level, and even with the highest office in the land. This concern that citizens are communicating with government across social media, and then content is being removed, citizens are being blocked, and the belief that First Amendment rights may be infringed upon in these cases has really led to a lot of legal challenges, ultimately then records requests, and court challenges, and court rulings. And so in Colorado, the local newspaper actually took a look at this, seeing this trend, and looked at situations across Colorado. And in just 3 situations, recent situations, found that the confusion and lack of coordination around how to deal with comments on social media has cost taxpayers $75,000, meaning that these 3 situations led to court settlements totaling $75,000. Now, again, it doesn't mean that you can't remove content. It doesn't mean that you can't block, but it means that you should be very careful about it and coordinated with your policy. It also means that it's likely that when you do remove content, you do block individuals, that it does ruffle some feathers. It may lead to then a challenge, may lead to a records request. Every legal challenge essentially comes down to, okay, show us what happened, and therefore a records request. And so you need to be prepared to be able to demonstrate that your agency is operating with procedures and is doing it the right way. And if you're not, it can lead to these kind of court situations and settlements. So let's flip it around and let's talk about a success story. So I said that this can be a problem, but it doesn't have to be. And that's really going to give us the setup for the remainder of my talk here on how to help your agency get ahead of these kinds of issues and protect your agency in these circumstances. A different customer of ours has had, in a different part of the region, a customer of ours has had not just 1 social media records request, not just 2, but 4 in 1 year. We actually did a webinar with them not too long ago, Northport, Florida. And this is a town that's not that large, right? But it doesn't take a lot of people to have somebody that's upset and disgruntled with city government. And an individual really became kind of a constant commenter with the city. There was a controversial post that received over 700 comments because the conversation was becoming unproductive. The people request for it. Now, this individual then subsequently made 3 other requests. For ways to say that the city wasn't doing what they should be doing. The good side of the story is that the city did have a clear policy. They had clear reasons for the actions they took, and they had the record keeping in place. So despite the fact that they were challenged repeatedly, they were able to easily respond, showed that the city followed the procedures that were in line with their policies, and it really protected the organization. And that is a story that you don't hear in the news because it's not that lawsuit, it's not that legal settlement. It's a government is challenged story, but government then demonstrates it's done what it should be doing, and the situation goes away, right? And what really the ultimate outcome there is that you can focus your time and energy on what matters, which is informing and protecting and helping citizens, right? And so that's something that we've seen behind the scenes over and over again, records requests on First Amendment issues, similar to what was highlighted in Colorado, but because the agency could demonstrate that they had done what they were supposed to, really stem the legal situation from going any further. So let's talk about that aspect of being able to tell your side of the story. And it does come down to having the records, the ability to produce the story of what happened on your social media. And Aransas Pass, if you want to know what happened, you go to their website, and all that's transparent. All the records are kept, and they're there available, transparent for you to find and review. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of complexity to this, right? And it starts with the fact that social networks, unlike your email, unlike your website, unlike even text messaging, are really out of your control. These records, this content of what you post and what citizens can say back to you at any hour of the day, any day of the week, all reside with third parties like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Vimeo and these other networks that you might be using. And those networks really own the data. They control the data. And they constantly change. So they may introduce new features. They may limit access to content. When Cambridge Analytica happened, if you remember that from the news, Facebook had instant changes overnight that were mandated by their CEO. And ultimately, none of the networks guarantee that they'll keep your records. None of the mainstream networks have any kind of guarantee for government that records will be maintained. In fact, they really promote the opposite, which is a private citizen has the right to privacy, and because of all of the privacy concerns that have arisen over the years, social networks largely promote that you as a private citizen control your own data, and if you want it to go away, they'll get rid of it. And so that's really at the other side of the spectrum of what government needs, which is the treatment of information that's sent or received, again, comments and replies received, treating that as public record. So the social networks really provide nothing in terms of a guarantee or a reliable means for you as government to maintain the records that you might need in a circumstance where you're challenged. So that is one of the key takeaways that we want you to understand, is that as you do really important things on social media, you really need to be on social media. It's really important to engage in an authentic, transparent fashion. And your social media is important, but because it's important, you're going to ultimately face a time where you need to produce records. You can't rely on the network to do that for you. You have to think about how you maintain records yourself. And to really make this point, we actually have done some studies here at Archive Social, right in the middle of another one that'll be released here soon. But most recently, we did a study out of 2017 where we focused in on 1 month. Our technology not only archives, but it detects deletions across all social networks. And the issue here is that if it's deleted off the social network, it's gone from the social network. Well, how big of a problem is this? And you can see the big blue letters here, over 214,000 records lost in 1 month. And that's from 500 government customers. So you can run the math a bunch of different ways, but essentially it comes down to an average of 10 records lost a day per government customer across their social media. That's a fair number of records. Now, some of them may be unimportant, but in the mix, there's no question that there's something important in there that could have been lost. Maybe a crime tip from a citizen, maybe a complaint, maybe some other record of value. And so this is a widespread problem. And if you're wondering, well, how does all this data get deleted? Why are these agencies deleting all the time? They're not. In fact, if you talk to these customers, as we do, we say, do you delete? almost every agency tells us that they avoid the delete button, that they don't want to delete. And most are true to that philosophy. Occasionally, you have multiple social media managers and somebody decides to quickly delete something they posted because it had an error in it. But most of the time, it's not really the agency deleting; it's the citizen, right? It's a set of citizens, and the citizen might post something, a crime tip. This has happened. We have case studies on this. A crime tip is posted, and then moments later, the citizen deletes it, and you've lost an important record. The citizen might delete a comment that you've replied to as city or county government or as a police department, and when they delete their comment, all of your replies get deleted too. They go away too. The citizen might quit Facebook, and when they do that, all of the records get pulled out. So a lot of different ways that can cause significant amount of data loss from the social networks. So again, big takeaway, you cannot rely on the social networks for your long-term records. So I laid out that I would talk about different ways to approach this notion of record keeping. And fundamentally, there's really three different options to look at here. One is to rely on the social networks. One is to take screenshots. This is sort of a basic, simple, no-cost way to keep records. And the third is to have some kind of archiving software. Again, we at Archive Social, full disclosure, provide archiving software, but there are various options for you to consider. So in the bucket of archiving software, you can look at technology that automates this record keeping for you. And this really lays it out. When you look at what's fundamentally important in terms of record keeping, you need to be able to get the data as quickly as possible, because the networks do not keep records for you, because anybody can hit delete at any time. Getting that information as quickly as possible in near real time or real time is very, very important. You need to have records of edits. If you post something and then you edit it, it's really two different communications at that point. You could have fundamentally changed the nature of the message. The same is true for a citizen comment to you. A citizen can comment on Instagram, perhaps on a post soliciting crime tips, and then edit their comment. Instagram does not maintain any kind of edit history for you to see. So how do you keep that record? And of course, comments can be hidden on numerous networks as well. You need metadata. Metadata is something that's a part of the record, and essentially it's the data that describes the data. So it's a little bit involved there, and I'm happy to answer a question on this in the Q&A portion. But it's a part of the record, and multiple states have ruled at the Supreme Court level that metadata is just as much public record as the content that you see in the message. You need to be able to find the content, and ultimately you need to be able to produce it. And when you boil it down to relying on the social networks, it's not that you're completely doomed to rely on the social networks. If you have a records request, by all means, go to Facebook, go to YouTube, go to Vimeo, try to find it. We've had agencies do that. Prior to having any kind of archiving software, they were trying to respond to a records request and did the best they could by going to the network. The network will have what it has, but does it have real-time capture? Does it have all the record keeping? Does it have the metadata available to you? Does it have the ability to reconstruct a wide variety of records back into a format that you can use for a records request? The answer is generally no. So if you move over to screenshotting, a lot of folks have employed screenshotting, particularly when it comes to testy situations. You know there's controversy, you know someone's raising a storm. Maybe you go ahead and start screenshotting. Maybe you do need to remove something because it violates your policy. You screenshot it. Again, not a black and white answer of this is a bad practice, but you have to understand how much it buys you. Again, screenshotting by no means is a real-time capture. It's a manual effort. You get what you get when you see it and during normal work hours. But we all know the rule in government and public information: crisis strikes, when you're on holiday. It's just a general rule that it's going to happen in an opportune time. So very difficult for you to catch that with screenshotting. Again, screenshots, because of the nature of it being manual, getting the edits and deletion, the hides, and capturing the deletions before they happen, very difficult. Screenshots don't have metadata. They're not searchable by any means. So if you have a treasure trove of screenshots, it's going to be a manual effort to go through all of them to find what you're looking for. And then that makes it difficult to respond to records requests. So again, understand that it is a tool. If you have no record keeping at all, and you notice a problem, definitely take a screenshot. No record is worse than having some record. But is it a solution to public records compliance and protecting your agency? Most agencies have found that it's not a long-term solution and that it's not scalable. So ultimately, to comply with your legal obligation in your state and to be protected as an agency, you do need some kind of automated record keeping. And so again, we've broadly bucketed this under archiving software. And there's, of course, nuances there. How one vendor captures Facebook will not be exactly the same as how another vendor captures Facebook. There's no way to do it exactly the same. So the rate at which they capture, the way we all deal with deletions and edits and hides, the way that we provide search capabilities, the way that we help you facilitate records, because all of that differs. But that's really where you should, if you're serious about solving this problem, you've seen the case studies, you realize you need to get ahead of it. Look for archiving software, and then the next level is to evaluate the differences between different archiving approaches. I did want to give you one of those examples when you think about archiving approaches and what it means to respond to a records request. Again, we've published a number of case studies around agencies receiving records requests all across the country. But one of the most overlooked facets that's understandable as an agency, you look at solutions and software and vendors and you say, can you search and produce data? And everyone's going to say yes. But one of the most overlooked facets of this is what does that response really look like? And so I wanted to paint a picture for you here briefly. When it comes to a social media records request, you're likely on multiple social networks. You likely have posts from you, maybe different departments. You certainly have posts from all sorts of different citizens. You have comments and replies coming in and private messaging. You have this giant mixed bag of content. And when you do a search fundamentally for a topic, maybe it's a street closing, and you have a records request around all communications related to a street closing. That should include your social media if you communicate across social media. When you do that search in any kind of record-keeping solution and archiving solution, it's going to match all sorts of Facebook posts and tweets and Facebook comments, and it's going to give you this list, this kind of single-layer list, as you see on the left side. If you were to then take that and provide that to an attorney or a person that's possibly suing the agency, right, that's aggravated, it's going to lead to a long back and forth because they're going to ask, well, where is this Facebook comment coming from? What's it in response to? Do these two Facebook comments relate to each other? How is this related to this other comment down here? That's a important question when it comes to social media, because social media is conversational unlike any other medium. So what you really need is an archiving approach that not only has your data, but then it can actually reconstruct that conversation, combine those comments back together, and provide the context of what's happening. And here's an actual records request that we helped facilitate for one of our customers, where a citizen did threaten legal action. And what's important is you find an archiving solution that reconstructs that entire conversation, brings back the other comments around it, brings back the information around it. So you as a PIO or someone responsible for facilitating helping with this records request, clicks the button, gets your data, and can hand it off to someone confidently. So that's just one example of what to look for in protecting your agency. And again, really important for you to thoroughly evaluate archiving software if you're going to go down that path. Ultimately, again, you don't have to really pick one of these right now. You need to assess your risk and then determine what you're going to do. But it is important to understand that risk. So relying on the social networks for record keeping does have a very high level of risk because you simply come back to, if it's there, it's there. If it's not, you don't have it, and you may fail to fulfill your legal obligation. Screenshots can help mitigate that risk at no cost, but keep in mind your time and the time of your staff is very costly, of course. And so archiving software ultimately is one where you will have to undergo some kind of cost. It is a very low cost when it comes to social media archiving in particular, but it can help reduce your risk as much as possible. So again, if you're doing anything meaningful on social media, you're concerned that you may one day receive a records request, you're probably going to find yourself steer very quickly towards looking at archiving solutions. So I'm going to stop there in terms of talking about archiving software, because the next level would be really to dive deep with the vendor of your choice. So I'm going to recap here and make sure that we have enough time for questions. Social media is a must for your agency, no doubt. You saw how powerful it was for Chief Blanchard to come in to institute that level of transparency, build that trust, and allow transparency to lead rather than that fallback of accountability, as he put it, where people are asking you and holding you accountable. They've already gotten the information from you. It is a must. Because it is so important, though, it faces all the challenges that anything important in government faces, which is people will sometimes feel like things are not being done the way they should be. They may have questions about how you're using their taxpayer money. They may be upset. It is important, and therefore will face important side effects, which include records requests and legal challenges. And we are seeing a fair volume of these records requests across the country. And it is really critical for your agency to take action and be proactive. If you've never had a records request before, now is the time to get ahead of it. When you actually have that records request, it's too late, right? When you need it, you really need it. And so when it comes to solving that, again, look to agencies like Aransas Pass for the policies they've instituted, the practice they've instituted, and the technology they've instituted. On that note, if you are intrigued about archiving software, if you have not done anything yet explicitly to manage records for social media, I do want to offer to our audience here an opportunity for us to help you better get your arms around the issue. So to be really clear here, the first phone call with Archive Social is not a product pitch. It is a discussion about you, how you're using social media, and the legal requirements. So if you want to understand more about the public records requirements in your state, that latest guidance that I mentioned on that state map, and how that applies to literally how you post on social media and what you receive, we can talk to you about that. If you're curious how agencies around you are approaching record keeping and the policies around it, we work with more than 2,000 public agencies across the country. We can happily connect you with agencies right around you, likely in your county. And then when it comes to real records requests and legal situations, if you've never had one and you want to make sure you're not the one in the news when one happens, there's likely been a records request right around you with a peer agency of yours or an agency of your type within your region. We see a lot of them. Again, most of them don't become national news because the agencies that we work with have put the appropriate measures in place. We can tell you about those exact records requests and legal situations and really fill you in on what's happening around you. And that is really that first phone call. So if you're interested in talking to us about that legal landscape and better arming yourself to protect your agency and you in the position that you have, we're happy to have that discussion with you. And for that, I'm going to go ahead and launch a quick poll, an optional poll. If you're interested in any of these options, go ahead and respond to this poll. And while that's up on the screen, I'm going to turn it back to Erica. I appreciate all of your attention here. And now, to be a further resource to you, we're here to answer your questions. I know you have questions for Chief Blanchard. If you have questions for me on the legal side, please go ahead and put those in as well. And we'll take the remainder of the time to answer as many questions as possible.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anil. It's really interesting to see how it all comes into play, especially in light of the news coming out of Colorado with those three coming together for $75,000 impact. So we have received several questions through the question function during the webinar. Of course, if you have a question you haven't asked yet, please don't hesitate to do so now. But while we're waiting for the rest of those to come in and you're answering that poll, let's go ahead and jump right in. Chief, we've gotten a lot of questions about how you use Facebook. So I'm gonna start with this first one here about moderating comments. This person asked, do you moderate comments or posts from your community? For example, if someone posts something inflammatory about the police department, how do you handle that?
So stuff that's posted inflammatory in nature about the police department, we don't moderate it at all. People have a right to express their opinion about us, is my view. And it's also an invitation to try to correct the issue. So anytime somebody posts something inflammatory or with inaccurate, incorrect, or false information, I use that as an opportunity to reply with the facts, links to sources of the facts, and then usually the following supportive community will come to bat for us. So it's not usually an issue. Now, how I got started on Archive Social was a military vet who was disabled and is anti-American, anti-police, basically, started bashing us very heavily about something we posted online. He got a crusade of followers to start reviewing our Facebook page with negative reviews to drop our 5-star rating down to a 2-star rating through some activist forum that he was a member of. And basically he was taunting me. So what I did do is I did block him. He then wrote me a long-winded reply to through our messenger or whatever. He was able to message us or email or something, basically telling me that I violated his rights to free speech, which he fought for this country, and he was disabled fighting for this country to sustain, and that he demanded that I open it up again, or he was seeking legal counsel. He provided me with links and references as to why I violated his rights and how other agencies were being sued, I think mostly in the liberal states like California and stuff. And it wasn't going well for those agencies. So I then started looking deeper into it. I ate crow. He was right. I was wrong. I reinstated him, allowed him to vent another day, and signed up with Archive Social to avoid future potential problems. I embrace the negativity. In fact, I seek the negativity. We police to perception in Aranza's past because perception is simply, folks, true reality. So we always have to cater our narrative, cater our efforts towards writing that positive perceptual narrative. So I let them vent. Don't restrict them. Let them talk. The only thing that we auto-moderate is the word, and I hate to say it, fuck. That's the only word that we block. And that will auto-hide that comment. Now, other people can sit there and, I guess, downvote or something, because I have seen where other comments just go hidden. But we will not remove them. We will not delete them, and I do not ban. I unbanned everybody that I had previously banned from our public sites.
Interesting. Awesome. So we had a follow-up question. I think you've answered here. Is there ever a time that a comment is just not deserving of a response? And do you have a standard you use to draw the line in dignifying inappropriate comments?
So yeah, that's very, very dynamic. Right now I got a guy, his name is Steven Sprawberry. You can go in the archive and search him. He's very upset that we acquired an MRAP vehicle. If you're not familiar, it's a heavily armored vehicle for very bad situations. It can also be used in our area. We flood a lot, so it can drive into flooded areas for rescues or police response. He is not happy. He thinks it's a waste of taxpayer money. He's expressed all these reasons why we're wasting taxpayer money, and not to mention he's not even a resident. He lives in a neighboring jurisdiction. I have already cleared the air with a response, and I've shared that response with others that have bought into his BS. And it's basically, I give you a fact-founded response, and I leave it at that. If you have constructive follow-up that you provide me, then I will continue the dialogue because it is constructive. I've turned many naysayers into strong supporters. And one thing to take away from that is your biggest naysayers on social media and online will be your strongest advocates that will go out of their way if you can flip them, but you have to work at it. So some of my biggest critics in the beginning are some of my strongest supporters today. So that's why I take on that challenge. Now, you are going to have people that are just totally lost. They're drinking that insanity Kool-Aid or whatever it is. I don't give them the time of day. I ignore the comment, and most of the time they're so overtly obvious, the community will chime in and start criticizing me. And those are a lot of things that, like, immediately anything you do is a racially motivated thing because all cops are racist, stuff like that. I don't jump into any of that. You argue with a stupid person, they're going to drag you down to their level and beat you with experience.
Yeah, that makes total sense. We have some more questions for you, but real fast, I've got one for Anil here. Anil, you mentioned that you facilitate public records requests. What kind of support does Archive Social provide when a police department receives one?
Yeah, great question, and it's really important to lay out that with our technology, it's really intended for the police department or the agency that has requests to be fully self-sufficient. All the technology is online. It's a web portal that you go through, and so all the records that are being captured are available there online, searchable, similar to the archive that Aranza's Past show, which is a public archive, an open archive. If as a customer of ours, you will have at least that portal internally at a minimum to be able to search and produce records on your own. So most of the time, agencies that receive records requests can do it themselves. Now, a lot of agencies we work with started archiving before they ever had their first records request or legal challenge involving social media. That first records request came in. As you might expect, it makes you a little nervous, right? And so oftentimes the phone call we get is, hey, I'm getting my first records request for social media. I just wanted to call you guys and walk through it and make sure I'm doing it the right way. So we have a customer experience team that's fully available. They happily walk you through it, get on the phone with you, make sure that you're doing the search the right way, make sure you have the data that's produced in a way that makes sense to you. But usually that's just a nice, helpful hand on your shoulder as you go through it yourself.
Great. And following up on that one, we have a question about pricing. What does pricing look like for a tool like Archive Social?
Sure. I mentioned this on briefly on a slide that I had that with social media record keeping and archiving, the cost is at a different level, a much lower level than a majority of IT products. I'm sure, Chief, you could probably talk to this as well. Because it's all cloud-based, it allows solutions like ours to be far more affordable than historically archiving for email and other records has been. So our rule of thumb is that this needs to be discretionary spend for 90% of agencies. So for us particularly, 90% of our more than 90% of our customer base is under 5,000 annual. We have a very simple, clear, fixed pricing model. Under 5,000 annual for 90% of agencies. And it really scales based on the breadth of your social media usage and the volume of social media you have. So for some agencies, many agencies are half that cost, and those that have a very robust social media presence might go above that. But under 5,000 annual for 90% of agencies is a clear way to look at it.
Okay. Another one here for you. Hi, Eric. About how long did it take to see some return on your efforts?
That's a good question reflecting back. When I came into the department, we had a department meeting, and of course we had some internal things to focus on. And I told my staff, I said, look, the rewards will come, but first there's got to be hard work and labor. So let's prove to the public and to the city admin that we deserve what we're going to be asking for or expecting. Within the year, and probably well before that, we realized good favor starting to come our direction. But again, it was like a night and day transformation. I lost 12 employees in the department within probably the first year. Some of them were fired. Some of them left on their own. And a couple of them I probably should have criminally charged because we did have internal corruption taking place. So once they started seeing that remain a consistent part of policing in the community with the transparency, community involvement, and all that stuff, it started coming greater. And I saw there was another question that asked about the following that we got on Facebook. How long did it take to get the following, and how did that happen? Hurricane Harvey, we did a live ride along after we had asked our community to evacuate Aransas Pass. And when they did, no other communities around us were putting out information. Well, we continued to put out live time information. We did a live ride along around town for about an hour and a half. People would chime in, hey, let me see what it looks like at my house. I live over on Avenue A in DeBerry. So we would drive over to that location and we would do a live video. And I felt that was the least we could do since we were staying behind for the hurricane. And we had asked our community to abandon their home and their town. The least we could do for them is to remain responsive. And we did that up until our water tower collapsed and we lost all communication with the outside world. We were the second or third hardest hit by Hurricane Harvey on landfall. So we did that all the way up until that point. When we came back online, we had over 1,000 requests for assistance and help because we had internet, but we had no phone, no cellular, no nothing, just internet. So Facebook was how you called 911 immediately after Hurricane Harvey, and people realized that. And our following went up from Hurricane Harvey alone. I think around 17,000 followers joined on to our place, our social stuff. But, yeah.
Well, I think we have time for one last fast question. Are your social media admins using their own personal Facebook accounts to post to department pages?
I have asked that they all separate their accounts. So, for example, my dispatch monitors Facebook 24/7. They all have a dispatch city-tied account that does the monitoring and that they communicate from. They don't want to be tied into where their personal accounts are being requested for open record and stuff like that.
Fantastic. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so unfortunately that's all we have time for today with today's webinar. Thank you, Chief Blanchard and Anil, for joining me today to discuss this very important topic.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank each of you for listening in today. I'll be sending out that email I mentioned at the top of the hour that will have the recording as a follow-up in case you want to go back and re-listen to the points that came out of here. Otherwise, have a fantastic afternoon.